It was the kind of village where time seemed to rest on the hills like morning mist, soft, slow, and stubborn to move. Our world was simple, but in its simplicity, we found rhythm. We were surrounded by whispering fields, winding footpaths, and neighbors who knew the story of your life almost before you lived it. I had a husband, a steady man. A provider, yes, but more than that, someone whose presence once felt like the anchor to my drifting spirit. People in our village spoke of him with respect. He was dependable, even-tempered, a quiet force. I admired him for those things. In the early days of our marriage, I would sometimes watch him from the window, sleeves rolled up, face bent in concentration over some chore, and feel a soft bloom of gratitude for the life we were building. And then there was our daughter, our bright, lovely girl with curiosity stitched into every glance. She was the melody in our home, always humming, always asking, always running barefoot with laughter trailing behind her like wind in the trees. She adored her father. She saw in him something noble, something strong and unshakable. And I suppose that's what made what followed all the more devastating. Life in our home was a quilt of rituals, early morning chores, meals cooked with care, stories whispered before sleep, and the gentle changing of seasons that brought predictability. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't loud. But it was ours. The horse came into our lives in the most unexpected of ways. A neighbor, aged and weary, could no longer care for it. She needs a good home, he told my husband. A gentle soul like yours will do her well. At first, there was hesitation. Another mouth to feed. Another responsibility to shoulder. But our daughter, oh, how she looked at that horse with wonder and compassion, as if she'd glimpsed something sacred. She needs us, she had whispered, her voice trembling with urgency. She's lonely. And so the horse stayed. She was a mare with warm, honey-brown eyes and a mane that rippled like wild wheat. She walked slowly, cautiously, as though the world had given her reason to be careful. Our daughter named her Nala, and from the very first day, they became inseparable. She would brush her coat with care, whispering stories and secrets as if Nala were some guardian spirit who could hold pain and joy without judgment. Often, I would catch them together, girl and horse, basking in the hush of twilight, a picture of purity and trust that made my heart ache with a feeling I couldn't name. Yet beneath the stillness of that world, a different current stirred. My husband had grown distant. His eyes, once sharp with purpose, now often drifted into silence. He still performed his duties, carried the wood, mended the fence, attended to the fields. But there was a restlessness in his step, as if his body was anchored here, but his spirit wandered elsewhere. Our conversations had changed. They were no longer rich with shared dreams or laughter but filled with practicalities, groceries, the roof, the weather. A hollow kind of companionship that kept us walking beside one another, but rarely hand in hand. I noticed it first in small things. The way his eyes lit up when the neighbor lady, Mara, stopped by with wild herbs or freshly baked bread. She was kind, certainly. A widow, younger than me, with laughter that bubbled like spring water. She had an ease about her, a way of making everyone feel seen. At first, I thought little of it. Friendliness, perhaps gratitude. But slowly, her visits grew more frequent, their conversations longer. I would watch from the window as my husband leaned in toward her, smiling in a way I hadn't seen in years. They laughed, real laughter, the kind that comes from someplace light and untouched by burdens. And in that laughter, I saw something slipping away. I told myself not to worry. That I was being paranoid, sensitive. That the man I married, the father of my child, would never betray what we'd built. But sometimes, knowing and feeling aren't the same thing. My daughter noticed before I did. Children do, even when we believe we're hiding things well. She would come to me with questions laced in innocence. Why does Papa talk to Miss Mara so much, or do you think Papa smiles more when she's here? I would shush her, stroke her hair, and tell her not to think such things. But the truth was already growing roots in all of us. Then came that evening, the one etched forever in my heart. The sun had begun its descent, casting a golden veil across our fields. I had stepped outside with a basket of laundry when I saw them, my husband and Mara, standing near the path by the orchard. They weren't touching. Not quite. But the space between them pulsed with something unspoken. Her hand brushed his arm, and his eyes closed for just a moment too long. And that was when I saw her, our daughter. Hidden behind the low stone wall, her face white, her little hands clutching her skirt. Her eyes, once full of wonder, now brimming with confusion, and a hurt too deep for her young heart. She said nothing. Not that night. Not the next. I found her later beside Nala, the mare's head resting gently on her lap. She sat still, almost as if she'd turned to stone. I sat beside her, reaching for her hand. But she didn't flinch. She didn't cry. She just whispered, "I saw them," and then leaned her forehead against Nala's shoulder. Something broke in me then. In the days that followed, silence took over our home. My daughter no longer asked questions. No longer ran through the yard with laughter. She spent hours with Nala, grooming her, feeding her, sleeping in the stable some nights. She spoke little to either of us, and when she did, her voice had lost its melody. And my husband, he knew. He saw the change. He tried to mend it, offering gifts, sharing stories, helping more with chores. But it was like trying to sew a torn sail during a storm. The damage had been done, and it would take more than kind words to restore what had been lost. I found myself drifting too. Standing in the kitchen, I would sometimes forget what I was doing. I stared at boiling pots with hollow eyes, wondering where the warmth had gone. Wondering if it had ever truly been there at all. I wanted to scream at him. To ask him why. Why trade the quiet love of a family for a fleeting spark? Why shake the foundation we had spent years building for the thrill of a moment? But I didn't. I couldn't. Instead, I watched him, watched the guilt twist through his features, watched him reach for our daughter only to have her turn away, watched him carry this new silence like a burden made of glass, threatening to shatter with every step. There was no confrontation. No dramatic fight. Just a slow, aching unraveling. And in the center of it all was Nala. The horse who had come to us as an afterthought, and now stood as the only thread holding our daughter's heart together. I began to spend more time with her too. There was a comfort in her presence, a steady calm that wrapped itself around the frayed edges of my emotions. She seemed to know, somehow, that she was being leaned on for more than just rides or chores. Some nights when the stars blinked awake and the wind rustled through the trees like a lullaby, I would sit beside Nala with my daughter, not speaking, just breathing in the quiet. Those were the moments I clung to. Because everything else was unraveling. The day the light dimmed, as told by his wife. It was the kind of village most people only hear about in stories, quiet, nestled between gentle hills and old trees that whispered with the wisdom of generations. Life here didn't rush, it flowed like the stream behind our home, steady and faithful. We were a family shaped by routine and simplicity. My husband, dependable as the sunrise, worked hard and loved quietly. He wasn't a man of many words, but he had always been present. I trusted him without question. And our daughter, our miracle, was the light in both our lives. She looked at her father with a kind of reverence that made my heart ache with pride. Our days moved in rhythms, morning chores, shared meals, tending to the garden, the laughter of a child echoing in the distance. For years, that was enough. It was a humble life, but it was ours, and it was whole. Then came the horse. A neighbor who could no longer care for it had offered it to us. At first, my husband hesitated. One more mouth to feed, one more responsibility. But our daughter had a gift for hope. Her eyes widened at the sight of the gentle creature, and she pleaded with such earnestness that neither of us could say no. So the horse became part of our home. It was a calm, graceful animal with wise eyes and a gentle soul. My daughter took to it instantly. She spent hours brushing its mane, whispering secrets into its ears, and walking beside it as though it were an extension of her spirit. They were inseparable. I often stood at the kitchen window, watching her run her fingers along its neck, her face alight with joy. In those moments I felt something eternal, peace, maybe, or the quiet certainty that we were doing something right. But peace can be deceiving. Though our family looked whole from the outside, cracks had begun to form, small at first, like hairline fractures in old pottery. My husband, my solid, quiet man, had begun to change. He became distant. His eyes, once steady and calm, seemed to drift, as if drawn to thoughts he didn't dare speak aloud. I tried not to worry. Marriage has seasons, I told myself. Some colder than others. Perhaps it was the burden of work, or age pressing down harder than before. But deep down, I knew. And then she started coming by. Our neighbor. A woman I'd known for years. She laughed easily, the kind of laughter that demanded attention. I saw how his shoulders straightened when she entered a room, how he offered her tea with a warmth that used to be mine. At first, I told myself I was imagining things. That it was harmless. But a woman knows. I didn't confront him. I didn't accuse. I watched. Quietly. Painfully. And then our daughter changed. She became quiet, too quiet for a child whose spirit had once seemed brighter than the sun. She avoided her father, her gaze shadowed by something too heavy for her young heart to carry. She spent more time with the horse, her hands constantly brushing its coat, her arms wrapped around its neck as though she needed its silence to make sense of the noise in her soul. I knew something had happened. I just didn't know what, yet. One evening, as dusk painted the sky in hues of gold and lavender, I watched from the kitchen door as he approached her in the field. The horse stood beside her, calm and unmoved, while he crouched down to speak to her. "Is everything okay?" I heard him ask, his voice unsure. There was a long pause before she whispered, "I saw you." 3 words. That's all it took. He didn't deny it. He didn't argue. I think he understood then that the damage wasn't just between us. It had bled into the innocent corners of our daughter's heart. He came in that night, quieter than usual. He looked at me, eyes rimmed with regret, and for a moment I saw the man I once knew, lost beneath layers of shame. We didn't speak. Not then. Days passed like ghosts, present but lifeless. The air in our home felt brittle. My daughter said little and smiled less. I tried to keep us afloat, cooked, cleaned, held us together in all the small ways that women often do when the big things are falling apart. And then, at dinner one night, she looked up from her plate. Her voice was calm, but carried the weight of heartbreak. "Why did you do it?" The room fell silent. He looked at her, really looked, and in that moment, I believe he realized the full weight of what he had done. "I made a mistake," he said softly. "A terrible mistake. It wasn't enough, not for her, not for me, but it was honest. I didn't ask questions. I didn't need to. I had seen enough in his eyes, in hers, in the cracks spreading like frost across our lives. In the weeks that followed, we moved through our days like strangers. He tried, oh how he tried. He fixed things around the house, helped more with the chores, tried to reach out to her in small, quiet ways. But she kept her distance. And I couldn't blame her. The horse remained a constant. It was her refuge, her confidant, the one creature that hadn't failed her. She spoke to it more than to us, her hands gentle, her presence clinging to it like a lifeline. One day, he carved something for her, a small figure of the horse, its shape imperfect but made with care. He offered it to her in silence. She looked at it for a long time before taking it. She didn't say thank you, but she didn't turn away either. It was the first crack in the wall she had built. He kept trying. He began helping with the chores she once loved, cleaning the barn, bringing water to the trough, mending the fence. He didn't speak much, just worked beside her, quietly, consistently. I think she noticed. Children do. I began to see change in him, not grand gestures, but small, steady ones. He asked for advice from others. He started spending time with the village elder, listening more than speaking. I watched him change, not into someone new, but into someone closer to the man he used to be. Someone I remembered. Someone I could believe in again. It wasn't a miracle. Healing never is. It was 1,000 little choices, made every day, to show up, to listen, to repair instead of retreat. And slowly, she started to open again. She spoke more, laughed once or twice. Her hand would brush against his when they passed tools or shared a task. The house was still quiet, but it no longer felt empty. There was hope in the silence now, not just sorrow. One evening, we sat on the porch, the three of us. The horse grazed nearby, the wind rustling the tall grass like an old lullaby. My daughter leaned against me, and then, surprisingly, against him. He didn't speak. He simply placed his hand over hers. She didn't pull away. It wasn't forgiveness. Not yet. But it was something. And in that moment, it was everything. Thank you for watching interesting stories of Moody Tales. Kindly like, subscribe and share to get more interesting and educative stories. That's much better than this. Best wishes. From here, have a nice day.